Okay, pandemic, and people are jobless all over the place. The president and his quick reaction and the printing of, over $6 trillion of stimulus has kind of righted the ship a little bit, but still, people's money is at stake. Dow crashing today, down 800 points. More concerns from the coronavirus. The death of Justice Ginsburg makes the markets feel a little unsafe because there'll probably be more division in our country. But nearly half of the Americans who lost their job to the pandemic can't last 1 month on their savings. And to break that down for us, Chris Burns joins us again right here on Liquid Lunch. He's the CEO of Dynamic Money, host of the Chris Burns Show. Chris, I talk a lot about the retirement gap for some of the elder folks in our audience, about how they think they've saved their whole life and they really only have about 24 months worth of money. This is a lot scarier because the Ginsburg thing probably halts the whole stimulus conversation, and people are literally penniless.
Yeah, any hopes that right now the market had that we'd get some sort of stimulus bill passed, which we're already kind of dimming, really stops with Justice Ginsburg passing away, because Washington's just turned into this nomination battle now. And so suddenly stimulus is put on the back burner. And like you said, what allowed the economy to get to where it was, where there was a little bit of stability, was that massive amount of stimulus that we basically printed a number of months ago. And there's no consensus going forward what that's going to look like. Looking at the numbers you're talking about, my biggest concern is, I think it was 42% of Americans in Fox News articles that couldn't come up at this point with $500 of cash. But the bigger issue is that number has gone up progressively over the last number of months. It was 38% 4 months ago, then 40%, now it's 42%. So we're not seeing things get better, even though a lot of people feel like, well, the economy's been doing better. In reality, more and more Americans are strapped for cash, and that's a huge problem going down the road.
Wow, that's a scary increase in the amount of people without $500 cash in their pocket, and it sure seems like the Republicans were at the table a couple of times on this stimulus bill, and the Democrats have it kind of log jammed in there. This is probably going to lay on top of that as well. But a lot of people I'm talking about have been telling me that because they eliminated that extra $600 bonus and knocked that down to $400, they're seeing some of their workers now want to come back to work. The summer's over, it's not $600 now, and it's kind of right in the ballpark where they want to get back to work. So maybe, in absence of a stimulus plan, more people will be motivated to hurry up and run back to their employer.
And you hope so. I mean, that was the goal. The challenge, or what's a little bit scary, is that Europe is already starting to see this resurgence of the virus. A lot of epidemiologists talking about the winter possibly being some sort of resurgence there, to the point that the UK is already discussing locking down significantly again, which is part of why we see the market dropping right now, is concern over lockdowns coming. So if we see something like that happen in the US again, where just as people are getting to the point of going, all right, you know what, stimulus isn't enough, I'm going to go get back to work. And then we're in the middle of an election cycle, so there's no clarity on a new stimulus package. And then we get hit with some sort of higher wave, or we have to see an economic slowdown again. That would just be a really bad combination of factors, obviously. So the hope is we don't see what a lot of the world is seeing right now, which is kind of the beginnings of an upward movement in the virus.
One of my former partners, he's a great famous television and movie producer, Craig Shapiro, absolutely hates Donald Trump. Absolutely hates him. He's my friend. We're personal level good. Politically, we can't agree on one thing. But he did say to me, the one thing I got to give Trump credit for, no other president would have acted that quickly and took his business mind and put it to the problem and printed all that money. They would have went back and forth, back and forth. Trump just went in and threw a bunch of money at it. I think that was a bigger move for the economy than the lockdown of China, but both together seem to have kind of buoyed us a little bit here.
Yeah, for a period of time, definitely. I think that's what's most concerning looking at the election. And I always tell people, look, what we know from Trump is that he will do everything possible, at least for a short-term gain. And I mean, whether you like him or not, you know he's going to do everything possible to get the numbers up. And so if he's elected, he's going to try and I mean, the Fed's doing remarkable things they've never done before to try to still create stimulus, right? We don't know what Biden would do, honestly, at all right now. I mean, we've heard talking points, but we really don't know how he's going to respond. And so I think that's the scary part for so many people is what kind of stimulus are we looking at? Where is that stimulus directed, depending on the next administration? And because that was such a big part of keeping us alive through the spring, if we don't see quick movement by Congress, what does that look like for the average American going into next year? You know, most of us had this timeline in mind. We thought by Christmas, certainly we'd be out of this, moving forward. Our lives would be moving forward. It's just not looking that way economically. And I think a lot of people are realizing that. For the common person right now that's sitting, that's not in economic hardship, if you're one of those Americans that does have cash on hand and you're just not feeling this because you're working remotely, your kids are fine, you're making money like you've always been making it, now is the time to really pause and go, am I saving as much as I can? Because don't think this couldn't extend to you just because right now you're not feeling it. It's hitting a lot of Americans.
You know, years ago when I was a younger fellow and I was working, you know, carpentry and roofing and stuff, an old guy I knew who was a great friend said, what you should do is every day when you get home, put $10 in a shoebox and just leave it there. Never stick your hand to take anything out. Just throw $10 in there. And you look up a few months later and then you got like $1,000 in an emergency fund. And all you got to do is before you take your pants off or before you go to bed, just throw a $10-bucker in there. And you know, I used to do it, and you'd be surprised, you know, when you don't think that's a place to go for supply. There was always like a little stash there if I wanted to go play cards or if I wanted to have, oh, wait, I got a few dollars there. What could people do to make sure they have a little emergency stash around, Chris?
Yeah, honestly, it's similar to what you're saying. The problem is that generationally, we just haven't experienced that. So my grandparents coming out of the Depression, that was their mindset, right? I mean, they would talk about literally if they got a raise, there wasn't even a question of spending that money. That raise was all going into savings. And we just don't think that way. So practically speaking, everybody always talks about, you know, go to Starbucks less and things like that. That's fine. But it really takes pausing right now and reconsidering your priorities, especially when you see how many Americans, even wealthy Americans in terms of income, don't have any savings. So when that income, when one of those two incomes, if they're married, goes away, they're stuck. Now is the time to sit and go, you know, I want to be contributing to my 401k. That's a great thing to do. But if you don't have an emergency fund, maybe pause on those contributions just to take that money and drop it in savings. You know, if you haven't looked at your insurance in a long time and you can relook at it and save $100-200 a month because, you know, State Farm's charging you way more than they did a decade ago when you started it. Now's the time to look at it. So be proactive now, especially if you're still in the position to do so that if you lose a job, et cetera, you're not stuck wondering what to do. Don't trust that Congress is going to figure it out. That's a massive question mark right now.
So let me ask you this in our final minute. One of my good friends has just got, you know, became a mortgage broker, and he's been around the financial services for a long time. And he's telling me how, you know, they're looking at people's mortgages now that had rates as low as 4%, and it's effective for them to refinance now.
Yep.
And they're taking, you know, maybe a $3,000, $3,100 a month payment, and it's going to like $2,500 a month.
Yeah.
And that kind of after 6 months or a year pays for whatever closing costs. But that might be a good way to save too. Take a look at your mortgage, and if you save $500-600 a month, throw that into savings, right?
Yeah, I mean, we said we would never see mortgages under 3%, and here we're sitting literally in the twos now, which, again, will that ever happen again? Who knows? But if you can even be saving, I just worked with my parents just did this, and they only saved about $150 a month. But for them, from a cash flow perspective, that's huge. And so for a lot of people, even if you refinanced 8 months ago, if you can refinance again and be, you know, saving, again, from a cash flow perspective, you're going to walk out getting some extra money every month, and you dump that money in savings. It's a heck of a lot better than the shoebox, I'll tell you.
There's no doubt about that, but, you know, the shoebox never hurt, you know, and
no problem with the shoebox.
My grandfather, Angelo, was a great gardener, and he used to say, sometimes you got to take some of the cash, you put it in the chock full of nuts can, and you bury it in the backyard, because if all hell breaks loose, you always got a few coffee cans buried in the back. So I like to try to keep at least a shoebox with a couple of scraps around, you know?
I imagine you do. I mean, I appreciate it. And again, putting money away any way you can right now, it's a smart idea.
No doubt about it. Always a smart idea to have Chris Burns join us. He's the CEO of Dynamic Money and the host of the Chris Burns Show. Brother, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll see you in studio in person again soon. But thanks for joining us today and imparting your wisdom on us.
And I hope so. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
You got it. That's Chris Burns. And there's lots more news of the day coming your way. You're not going to believe all the craziness going on, but you know what's happening out there. Dow is literally getting crushed, and I'll tell you more about that in just a minute.